They say the river never forgets. But in the heart of Africa, where the waters once whispered secrets to kings and healers, a name has almost vanished. Aguiyi, the god who breathed life into rivers and health into those who bathed in them. Before pipelines carved through sacred wetlands, before the concrete drowned ancient footpaths, the river was a temple. Not just a source of water, but a divine being, pulsing with memory, spirit, and healing. Aguiyi wasn't merely respected. He was feared, honored, and adored. To displease him was to invite drought. To please him was to summon abundance. His presence lingered in the ripples, in the mist, in the quiet song of the current. Elders spoke of rivers that glowed under moonlight, waters that healed the sick, and pools that whispered omens to the wise. And at the heart of it all was Aguiyi, unseen but never absent. He was in the swell of floods and in the calm after the storm. Children were taught to bow before the river. Women sang to it. Diviners read its patterns like scripture. His energy was said to move with the fish, churn with the tides, and bless the womb. Aguiyi wasn't just a god, he was life. But who was this forgotten deity of flowing life? Why did people fear, worship, and speak his name only in the hush of ritual? This is the story of Aguiyi, the African god of healthy rivers, guardian of purification, fertility, and renewal. His legend stretches across deltas and lagoons, through the reeds of the Niger and beyond. For generations, he shaped the fate of tribes, gave visions to spiritualists, and blessed women with life-giving waters. Where his spirit moved, rivers thrived. Where it was ignored, waters withered. In this journey, we'll uncover how Aguiyi's presence once guided entire communities, the sacred rituals performed in his honor, his divine connection to women, healing and rain, and why the erasure of his name mirrors the environmental crisis threatening Africa's most vital rivers today. Because this isn't just mythology. It's a call, echoing through polluted streams and dried-up riverbeds, for us to remember the forgotten gods of water. Their names were not just stories, they were systems of balance, guardians of nature's rhythm. So stay close. The current is about to pull us into the depths, where memory, spirit, and water collide. And at the heart of that current is Aguiyi. Long before borders were drawn and empires mapped out, there were rivers, and there was Aguiyi. His story, shrouded in the mist of time, flows from the oral traditions of ancient riverine cultures spread across West Africa, particularly in regions cradled by the Niger River. Though his name may differ from one dialect to another, Aguiyi, Aguiyi, or even the one who flows with spirit, the essence remains. He was the sacred guardian of life-giving waters. Aguiyi wasn't born in the way gods often are, with grand celestial battles or thunderous births. He emerged from the earth itself, from the sacred union of water and spirit. Elders say he was born where the first river kissed the land, a moment so divine that it birthed not only a god, but a covenant between nature and humanity. His spirit entered the waters, blessing them with healing properties, fertility, and divine knowledge. From that point on, every stream was a passage, every river a pulse of something holy. In his earliest mentions, Aguiyi was not worshipped from afar, but engaged as a presence, as real as the trees and the soil. To many, he was a living ancestor. The river wasn't just Aguiyi's domain, it was his body. To pollute it was to wound him. To swim in it was to touch the divine. It's said he would appear in dreams to the chosen, priests, priestesses, healers, guiding them with riddles and visions of how to maintain balance in their communities. Carvings on ancient stones, hidden in river caves and shrines along the delta, depict a fluid figure with arms like currents and eyes shaped like drops of rain. In some traditions, he bore fish on his crown, not as decoration, but as messengers of his will. Water snakes, often feared in other cultures, were sacred in his. They symbolized his duality, gentle yet powerful, healing yet destructive when dishonored. Aguiyi was especially revered by riverine communities during childbirth, planting seasons, and times of drought. When rains failed, people didn't just look to the skies, they turned to the river, speaking his name into the current, offering libations, songs, and sacrifices in sacred bowls carved from trees that grew closest to his banks. His worship was not uniform, but deeply localized. In some areas, he was a brother to the wind. In others, a jealous god who demanded respect above all. But everywhere, he was a bridge between spirit and soil, sky and stream. As trade expanded, and different tribes intermingled, Aguiyi's myth evolved. In some regions, he became part of divine councils alongside earth and fire deities. In others, he was more solitary, the wandering god who whispered only to those willing to sit in silence beside a riverbank. He was a mystery and a memory, powerful and personal. Though the written word has rarely captured his tale, Aguiyi's legacy lives in the rhythm of drum chants, in the wails of river festivals, and in the quiet respect villagers still show to flowing water. He is not gone. He is submerged, waiting for the moment the world remembers him again. Aguiyi was no distant deity confined to lofty temples. He was everywhere water touched, from the smallest brook to the roaring river mouth, and his power flowed through every droplet. More than just a spiritual figure, Aguiyi was seen as a living force that healed, purified, nourished, and punished. His domain wasn't just the physical riverbanks, it was also the human body, the womb, the mind, and the air surrounding the water's edge. One of Aguiyi's most powerful associations was healing. River water blessed by his spirit was believed to cure fever, cleanse wounds, and even soothe spiritual sickness. Healers would gather water before dawn, when the river was silent and unbroken, believing that Aguiyi's spirit rested on the surface like a veil. They would whisper prayers into the water and mix it with herbs, ashes, and sacred oils to make potent medicines. His water was not just for the body, it was for the soul. Women struggling with fertility would bathe in secluded parts of the river where Aguiyi was known to reside, sometimes after intense rituals involving chanting, dancing, and offerings of palm oil or kola nuts. Aguiyi's symbols were deeply elemental. The most powerful was the water snake, sleek, mysterious, and feared by many, yet honored as his sacred messenger. To see a snake swimming upstream was said to be a blessing. To harm it, a curse. Another powerful symbol was the fish, especially catfish and tilapia, believed to be his eyes in the water. Calabashes, hollowed gourds used to fetch water, also took on spiritual significance. Decorated with cowries and blue paint, they were used in rituals to both give thanks and ask for mercy. His colors were blue and silver, the tones of twilight reflecting on a calm river, and they were often worn by his priests and priestesses during ceremonies. These garments flowed like water themselves, rippling with movement, designed to embody the river as they danced and invoked his presence. Aguiyi's domain extended into rain, tides, and even dreams. During dry seasons, he could be summoned with songs known only to a few elders. It said his anger would rise when humans disrespected nature, throwing waste into rivers, damming their flow, or taking from the waters without offering thanks. In these cases, Aguiyi responded not with thunder, but with silence. Drought, sickness, and spiritual confusion would follow. But when honored, his blessings were transformative. He could grant a bountiful harvest, cleanse an entire village of spiritual pollution, or reveal truths through vision quests done near the water's edge. Entire communities depended on his favor, building shrines close to sacred water sources and consulting river priests before any major decision. From marriage to migration, Aguiyi was more than a river god. He was a principle, the belief that life, when in balance with nature, flourishes. His symbols weren't just decorations, they were reminders. His power wasn't just in myths, it lived in every tide, every rainfall, and every human act of reverence toward water. The worship of Aguiyi was a ceremony of life, not confined to four walls, but open to the sky, the trees, and the sacred breath of the river. Rituals dedicated to him were not only acts of devotion, but moments of alignment with nature's rhythm. In the villages that sat beside sacred waters, worship wasn't scheduled. It was lived, felt, and carried in every bucket of water drawn from the river. Aguiyi had no singular temple. His shrines were the riverbanks, shaded groves, and secret pools known only to the initiated. Some were marked with stones stacked in silence. Others were adorned with flowing white cloth and small offerings. Calabashes filled with water, palm oil, yam, smoked fish, and cowries. These items weren't just gifts, they were symbols of gratitude meant to nourish the god who nourished them. The people believed that Aguiyi listened to songs, especially those sung by women. During moonlit nights, especially after the first rain, priestesses would gather at the river. Clothed in flowing fabrics of white and indigo, they would begin the sacred chants, low and melodic, meant to echo through the trees and water. The songs told stories of births and droughts, of healing and visions, all woven with the name of Aguiyi. These rituals were communal, drawing people together in a shared pulse of rhythm and reverence. In many regions, children born near the river were dedicated to Aguiyi. Their names would reflect water, purity, or his spirit. These children were often believed to carry his mark, a birthmark shaped like a wave, or an unusual calmness around water. They were raised with special instruction, taught to honor the river and avoid polluting its flow. As they grew, some were chosen to become custodians, not only of the river, but of the oral history that preserved Aguiyi's legacy. Festivals in his honor were grand but deeply spiritual. In some communities, the annual Omanala Miri, water tradition, drew entire villages to the riverside. Dancers painted with blue clay would move like waves, mimicking fish and snakes in sacred choreography. Drums mimicked thunder. Offerings were floated downstream in elaborately woven baskets, with prayers carried by the current. If the offering sank gently and disappeared, it meant Aguiyi had accepted it. If it was rejected, tossed by waves or pushed back, the elders would declare a warning: something was out of balance. Priesthoods devoted to Aguiyi were primarily matriarchal. Women, believed to be direct vessels of the river's energy due to their life-giving role, often served as high priestesses, or ndimiri. They interpreted dreams, received visions, and prescribed sacred baths for healing and spiritual protection. Their wisdom was passed in secret, through ritual and rhythm, not writing. Men served too, especially in protection roles, guarding the sacred sites and organizing the community around large river rituals. Sacred baths were central to Aguiyi's worship. These were not casual immersions, but spiritual ceremonies. Participants would fast, pray, and then walk barefoot to the river, where priests would perform incantations and pour herbs into the water. Each person would step into the river slowly, letting the current pass over them like a blessing. Emerging from the bath was considered a rebirth, physically clean, spiritually awakened. And then there were the taboos. To urinate in the river was a grievous offense. To kill a river snake was a spiritual crime. Even cutting down trees that leaned over the water required permission from the priesthood. These rules were not just religious, they were ecological. Worship for Aguiyi's followers was a system that preserved the land and ensured the sustainability of life. These sacred traditions, rooted in harmony, reverence, and deep ecological wisdom, formed the backbone of Aguiyi's worship. They weren't relics of the past. They were blueprints for a world where rivers are sacred, healing is holistic, and the divine is not above, but among us, flowing in every stream. The fall of Aguiyi's worship didn't happen overnight. It came quietly, with the sound of gunboats, the arrival of foreign Bibles, and the slow unraveling of indigenous memory. As colonial empires expanded across Africa, rivers that were once sacred became strategic. No longer seen as divine arteries of life, they were rebranded as resources, mapped, measured, and monetized. And with this shift came a systematic effort to erase the gods that lived within them. Colonial administrators viewed African spiritual systems not as complex theologies, but as obstacles to civilization. Missionaries, particularly, were relentless in their mission to replace river deities with imported religion. Aguiyi, once spoken of with awe and reverence, was recast as a superstition, a relic of pagan darkness. His shrines were torn down, sacred rituals were labeled demonic, and his priests and priestesses were silenced, sometimes through ridicule, sometimes through force. Where once communities gathered to honor Aguiyi through dance and chant, they were now gathered in chapels and told to confess their reverence as sin. Children were banned from participating in river rituals. Sacred knowledge, once passed through generations, was now hidden, whispered only in corners, if at all. To be seen worshiping at the river was to risk shame, punishment, or worse. But the suppression went deeper than religion. It was cultural and psychological. Colonial policies redrew maps, renamed rivers, and imposed European governance structures that ignored the traditional ecological knowledge rooted in deities like Aguiyi. River taboos were ridiculed. The balance between nature and spirit was broken. And so, rivers were dredged, polluted, and diverted without ceremony, as if the gods had never lived there. What made Aguiyi especially vulnerable to erasure was his invisibility. Unlike mountain gods or thunder spirits who could be imagined as far off and majestic, Aguiyi was close. Too close. He lived in everyday rituals, in daily water use, in the soft lapping of current against skin. When people were forced to stop engaging with the river spiritually, they lost their relationship with him. He became memory, then myth, then silence. Still, traces of his presence endured. Some elders refused to let go. In hidden corners of villages, small shrines remained, kept alive by a few who still remembered his songs. Old women carried his rituals in their bones. Children heard whispers about him during long walks by the water. But these were fragments, scattered, fading, vulnerable. Colonialism didn't kill Aguiyi, but it did bury him beneath foreign texts, polluted streams, and the shame of being told that one's gods were wrong. Yet as with all things connected to water, there is movement, return, and rebirth. And Aguiyi, though submerged, has not disappeared. In recent decades, a quiet ripple has begun to stir beneath the surface. A spiritual awakening, reconnecting modern Africans and diasporic communities to ancestral roots. In this renaissance, Aguiyi, long buried beneath colonial silence, is rising again. Not in grand temples or state rituals, but in whispers, dreams, songs, and stories retold by a new generation hungry to reclaim what was once stolen. Among spiritual circles across West Africa and beyond, there's a growing movement to revive indigenous knowledge systems. Systems where nature is sacred, ancestors are guides, and deities like Aguiyi are not forgotten but revered once more. In Lagos, Accra, and across the Caribbean, traditional spiritual practices are being blended with art, environmental activism, and ancestral memory. And in these spaces, Aguiyi's name returns, a symbol not just of a forgotten river god, but of spiritual sovereignty. Modern practitioners of Ifa, Vodun, and other African spiritual traditions have begun reintroducing river deities into their rituals. Some include Aguiyi among the Orisha, honoring him as a spirit of sacred healing waters. Others interpret him as an ancestral archetype, a representation of the harmony between humanity and nature, water and wellness. New songs are being composed, old chants recorded and preserved, and digital archives created to house the oral histories once erased. Artists, too, are awakening to his myth. In poetry and painting, in digital murals and underground films, Aguiyi is being reimagined. Some depict him as a serene, black-skinned figure rising from the Nile. Others show him crowned in river snakes and glowing blue, walking through modern cities unseen, watching as people waste and disrespect the water he once guarded. These interpretations, while varied, all echo one truth. Aguiyi is still alive in the cultural bloodstream. Environmentalists and activists have also found power in his name. In regions where rivers are poisoned by oil spills, deforestation, or damming, Aguiyi has become a symbol of protest, a voice for the river, a god of resistance. Campaigns to protect water rights now incorporate spiritual framing, drawing connections between ecological justice and cultural resurrection. To fight for the river, they say, is to fight for Aguiyi. To clean the waters is to welcome him back. Young people, from urban spiritualists to rural traditionalists, are starting to reclaim rituals that honor Aguiyi, creating community ceremonies that fuse the old with the new. Smartphones record chants, Instagram posts showcase sacred offerings, TikTok videos explain his myths in modern slang. This may seem like a contradiction, ancient divinity in digital form, but it is exactly how Aguiyi's spirit moves, fluid, adaptable, flowing wherever belief is strong enough to hold him. This resurgence isn't about nostalgia, it's about reconnection, about remembering that Africa's spiritual heritage is vast, valid, and vital. Aguiyi is not just a god of rivers, he is a reminder of what it means to be in balance, to revere what sustains us, and to live in rhythm with the natural world. And as more people return to the rivers, not just to fetch water, but to feel, to pray, to remember, the current of Aguiyi grows stronger once more. Today, the rivers that once sang the name of Aguiyi now cry out in silence. Polluted, dammed, diverted, and abused, Africa's rivers, once sacred veins of spiritual and ecological life, now run dry in places, toxic in others. In these wounded waters, the absence of Aguiyi is felt more than ever. The Niger Delta, once a lush wetland teeming with life, now bears the scars of oil exploitation. Dead fish float in slicks of crude. Villages that once depended on clean, flowing water now face sickness and displacement. and the rituals that once honored the river god have been replaced by court battles, environmental protests, and desperate survival. The river still flows, but its spirit is broken. Across the continent, rapid urbanization and industrial waste continue to choke waterways. In Ghana, Lake Volta wrestles with illegal fishing and deforestation. In Kenya, the Nairobi River, once a source of pride, now carries the stench of plastic and sewage. And yet, even amid this destruction, the idea of Aguiyi, as guardian, as healer, as divine judge, is returning to consciousness. Because Aguiyi's story is more than myth, it's a blueprint. It reminds us that to see water as sacred is to treat it with care. To believe in the spirit of the river is to build systems that protect it. In forgetting Aguiyi, humanity has forgotten how to live in balance. In remembering him, there lies hope, not just spiritual, but ecological. He is the god of healthy rivers. But health isn't just water quality. It's respect, protection, and a return to harmony. Perhaps Aguiyi's greatest message today is not about rituals or offerings, but about accountability. The river is watching, and it remembers everything. Aguiyi may have been silenced, but he was never destroyed. Like the rivers he embodies, his spirit adapts, flows, and waits. Through myth, ritual, activism, and art, his presence is rising once again. Not as a relic, but as a guide. His story teaches us that spirituality and ecology were never separate in African thought. To honor the divine was to protect the land. To revere the river was to safeguard the people. Aguiyi wasn't just a river god. He was a code for survival, a reminder that health is both spiritual and environmental, individual and collective. In every sacred bath, in every whispered chant, in every effort to clean a poisoned stream or protect a disappearing wetland, Aguiyi lives again. And as we face an uncertain ecological future, his legend offers more than memory. It offers direction. So the next time you stand before a river, pause, listen, feel the current. You may just hear his voice, deep beneath the surface, asking us not for worship, but for remembrance. And if you felt something stir in you during this journey, a memory, a call, a thirst, then let it guide you to learn more, to protect more, to honor more. Because Aguiyi isn't just history, he's the water you hold in your hands. If this story moved you, subscribe for more forgotten legends, spiritual deep dives, and sacred truths. Like, comment, and share, because stories like Aguiyi's deserve to flow far and wide.